I'm going to make a transition real quick here. Exact Sciences. So Exact Sciences was another broken molecular diagnostics company, truly broken. It had just a couple of people, $25 million of cash, and it had burned through $175 million trying to develop a non-invasive colon cancer screening test. And the science really wasn't there yet. The technology wasn't there yet. It was based in Boston. I think the biggest factor is the company wasn't in Wisconsin. We moved, when I took the job, we moved the company to Wisconsin, and the company at that point was Manisha Arora, our CFO, and me. We were sitting at a table, one table, in a very small room, and we were a small public company. And the first week, we got a delisting notice from NASDAQ. So we had about 30 days to correct that. But the focus of the company and the reason that we were so excited about joining the company is that if you can develop a molecular diagnostic test that takes a small patient sample, I'll say it out loud, a small stool sample, we can detect with our test tiny, tiny numbers of DNA that are being shed from a 1 centimeter precancerous polyp that is 10 years away from turning cancerous. And if you can do that, you can send a patient to colonoscopy and tell them, you need to go to colonoscopy, and if you go to colonoscopy, cancer will be prevented. Well, 5% of everybody in this room over the age of 50 is walking around with a precancerous polyp. And about 0.7% of people over the age of 50 will develop, is walking around today with colon cancer. It is the number 2 cancer killer. 50,000 people a year die from colon cancer, and 150,000 people are diagnosed. And guess what? With obesity increasing, it's really increasing among the 30 to 50-year-olds that aren't even screened in this country, are largely not screened. So our test is a very simple test. Home collection, you actually mail this in a special package back to a lab, and that lab will provide your doctor with a result that will either tell you you're okay to have this test done in another couple of years, or you need to go in and get a colonoscopy. And so you have the ability with this test not only to stop colon cancer or catch it early, but to actually prevent it. The Pap test is the only test that has eradicated a cancer for women who use that test. 35,000 women a year used to die of cervical cancer in this country. Last year, 3,500 did. It's actually a little-known story that it has actually eradicated a disease. Colon cancer is just as easy to eradicate. It just hasn't been because there's not a non-invasive, easy-to-use test. So when we joined the company in 2009, the stock was trading at 80 cents. Today, it's at about $7. And with a $1.2 billion a year opportunity here, we believe that we can create significant value going forward. So we're excited about this company, and let me tell you, Wisconsin is a great place to grow a biotech company. You can hire tremendous people out of one of the finest biotech programs in the world at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we've been able to very quickly hire 34 really capable R&D scientists and build a company. We now have 50 employees, and we will start clinical trials to enroll up to 12,000 patients over starting in the next quarter. So we're really excited about where the company is going. And I'll switch quickly. There's a new proposal in the legislature to create a venture capital fund in the state, what's called a fund of funds. It's being labeled as the Badger Fund. This is not new. There are states all around the country that have done this very successfully. Ohio is probably the best example, where they created over $1 billion fund. And what's being proposed today is about a $200 million investment by the state. It's actually not cash out of pocket from the state, so it will not affect the general fund. Contingent tax credits will back a loan made to a new venture. SWIB has actually talked about potentially participating in this. So there would be a bond for about $200 million that would be put into this venture capital authority. And that authority would then go out and attract other venture capital, or to attract about 12 venture capital firms to come to Wisconsin, or firms that are in Wisconsin would look at funding, they would have to match 3-to-1. So you could lever this $200 million to $800 million of capital. They would have to open up offices in the state, hopefully around the state, so you would be able to address multiple regions throughout the state. And ultimately, the state is an investor like any other investor into a venture capital fund. And over a 5 to 10 to 12-year period would typically see not only their capital return, but a profit. And again, so this would not impact the general fund of the state. And the critical thing is there are a lot of early stage companies that either aren't being started or being started and closed because they can't raise the capital, or worse, go to another state. And there's a great ecosystem of startups in this state. I mean, it's very different than a lot of other states in the Midwest, and we have some great assets, namely our university system, which is throwing off ideas, but we're not starting companies. We are number 48 out of 50 in terms of new company formation. This is the Kaufman report that came out in March. 48 out of 50 were half the national average. So if you take that out over the long run, it's very difficult for us to keep up with the states that we're competing against if we don't seed a venture capital fund. We have one sizable venture capital fund in the state, and there are some great people out there who are starting smaller funds, but the one that we have is almost maxed out. There's basically hardly any venture capital available for entrepreneurs in this state, and so this is something we should get behind. I will say personally, I do not support the second program that goes along with this, which is called a CapGo program, and the main reason I don't support it is that is typically a big cash drain to the state. And so, but the Badger Fund is really a good idea, and people in this room, to the extent that you can talk to your legislatures, learn about this, lob in a telephone call or send a letter, it would be really helpful and I think important to the state. And I hope I didn't go over too long. I'd like to open the floor to any questions.